According to a bombshell new report from the Bank of Canada, we are heading toward a massive real estate supply cliff in the GTA that will start to be felt in 2 to 3 years. If you've walked through downtown Toronto lately, you'll see cranes in the sky and it looks like business as usual. But those cranes are finishing projects that were sold 5 to 6 years ago. But behind the scenes, Toronto condo pre-sales have ground to a near total halt. And here's what's happening. New condo starts in Toronto have fallen from a high of almost 34,000 units in August of 2023 to just 9,000 in November of 2025. This is a fall of 73%. And condo starts are a lagging indicator that are directly dependent on new condo sales. Well, condo pre-sale purchases have fallen from a high of about 16,500 in Q4 of 2027 to just 159 in Q3 of 2025. This is down 99% from the peak. If something isn't done soon, the residential construction industry in Toronto is going to completely collapse, and this is going to have broad economic implications across all of Canada. Now let's step back in history. Prior to the 1990s, the modern concept of pre-construction condo sales didn't exist. Instead, the condo market in Toronto and the GTA operated on a model where developers financed and completed the construction of buildings before units were offered for sale to the public. The process to buy a condo then was exactly the same as a resale purchase because the units were complete and move-in ready. This eventually shifted to the current pre-construction model where buyers purchase units before construction has even begun. This transition moves significant risk from developers to buyers, serving as the primary funding mechanism for GTA construction over the last 30 years. But back in the day, in exchange for this increased risk, buyers were historically compensated with prices that were lower than those in the resale market. Unlike today, where pre-construction is typically priced higher than resale. Now, this model is broken, and we may never see it return in its current form. So to understand the current crisis, you have to understand how condos get built. Because banks just don't give developers hundreds of millions of dollars to build a tower on a whim. They usually require that the developer pre-sell 70% of the units before a single shovel hits the ground. And historically, investors have flocked to those pre-sales. But today, the Bank of Canada notes that pre-sales have plummeted to the lowest numbers on record. When pre-sales die today, the buildings that have been completed in 4 to 5 years effectively disappear. They're not going to get built. For a decade, buying a condo on paper was a guaranteed win. You'd put your 20% down, wait 3-4 years, and the unit would be worth much more than it was by the time it was finished. The game has now changed, and the math does not work for the average investor because there's a price gap where many condos finishing today are actually worth less than what people agreed to pay for them just a few years ago. Interest rates have also risen from historical lows where some investors thought they're going to be able to carry a mortgage at 2%. They're now looking at interest rates of 4 to 5%, making it impossible to cover the costs with the rent. Now, you can make any property cash flow by putting down an extra down payment, but this is something that most people are just not able to do. And developers had spent years building tiny shoebox suites for international students and for short-term renters. These units were a hit with investors because they were more affordable to buy and the cash flow worked better than buying those larger units. Now, with population growth at 0 or even negative and a very weak labor market, there's now a massive oversupply of tiny, poorly designed units and a complete lack of those larger units that actual families need. Now, construction tends to be a slow motion business. It takes a long time to build a building. So the starts we see today are based on sales from 2021, 2022, years ago. I once personally had a condo building take 7 years to be built after it was sold. So since pre-construction sales have dropped to historical lows and virtually zero in 2025 and 2026, There's going to be a period starting in 2 to 3 years where completions will drop to and stay at near zero. This isn't just a Toronto problem. This is a Canada crisis. Residential construction is a massive part of our economy and GDP. And when the cranes come down and they don't go back up, that means that construction jobs are going to vanish. Thousands of tradespeople and professionals are going to be out of work. And rent may actually spike because there's no new supply hitting the market in 2028, 2029, 2030. But people still need places to live. So the competition for existing apartments may become cutthroat again. And with the declined economic activity, the economy is likely to stagnate as the condo wealth effect that has powered spending in Ontario for the last 2 decades is evaporating. And we're going to have large net effects on the broader Canadian economy. So we are currently living through the quiet before the storm. Pre-construction investors have disappeared, leaving sales centers and model homes empty. This lack of current investment guarantees that there's going to be a housing shortage at the end of this decade that may be more severe than anything we have seen before. Furthermore, sales figures risk falling below zero if recently sold buildings fail to meet their 70% financing thresholds and those projects are canceled or converted into purpose-built rentals. And this is further going to reduce the supply of condos. So to prevent a total collapse of the housing market, the way we build in Canada must evolve. Now, for years, developers built investor-grade shoeboxes. These were sub 500 square foot units that were never meant to be lived in long term. They were more like financial instruments than houses. We need to return to livable design with floor plans that were built for people, not for spreadsheets. This means bedrooms that actually fit a bed and a nightstand beside it, somewhere to put a TV in your living room, and a balcony that fits not only a chair, but also a table and you can go out on and enjoy the outdoors. But we need a much greater mix of larger family-oriented units in every project. Some of the projects in Toronto sold, they had over 70% that were one bedrooms or studios. So if a home isn't functional for the residents, it's not solving the housing crisis. It's just a temporary parking spot for capital, which needs to change. Now, the power imbalance of the current Condo Act in Ontario is staggering, and a buyer's bill of rights, I think, is needed. Because buyers purchase units based on the developer's contract, not a standardized agreement of purchase and sale, which are used for the purchase of an existing property. These developer contracts are completely one-sided in favor of the developer, and they give them broad powers over the buyers who are left in the dark and with no input during construction. Developers can change floor plans, building designs, amenities, parking spaces, nearly anything in the building. And the Condo Act needs to be rewritten to include standard purchase agreements to protect buyers and make sure that they get what they pay for. We need transparency that treats the buyer as a partner, not just a piggy bank. Now, this is a pet peeve of mine. Interim occupancy fees are a black hole for buyers' money. You pay the developer rent until the building is registered, but that money doesn't go towards your principal. And occupancy interest, it needs to be capped at the Bank of Canada prime interest rate, not the Bank of Canada 1-year conventional mortgage rate, which is significantly higher. What is that rate anyways? Who uses that? I think capping these rates creates a massive incentive for developers to close and register buildings faster. No more 1 to 2 year occupancy periods. Developers should not be allowed to profit from delays in registration, and residents should not have to live in a construction zone. Better yet, eliminate the concept of interim occupancy altogether. This period only benefits the developer, and it creates a legal limbo area for buyers where they have possession of a unit that they don't legally own, and it causes all sorts of problems, like the inability to sell the property or to rent it out during occupancy, unless the developer approves. Developer has all the power. In provinces like Alberta, pre-construction properties go straight to closing. There is no occupancy period. The building is either inhabitable or it's not. I think we need to go back to this. The current landlord-tenant backlog is a gift to professional tenants who exploit the system to live rent-free for a year or more. And this can lead to thousands in unpaid rent, damages, and legal bills for the landlord, which can easily break their finances. This risk is a major reason why mom and pop investors are fleeing real estate investments. We have to split the system. Simple non-payment cases should have an automated 30-day fast track for resolution and extra adjudicators hired by the province to clear the existing backlog of tens of thousands of cases. By removing bad actors quickly, we protect the 99% of good tenants and give investors the confidence to provide that rental supply that Canada desperately needs. Rent, or its non-payment, needs to be allowed to be reported to credit rating agencies. This will massively benefit good tenants as they get reward for paying their rent on time, and it'll create a huge disincentive for bad actors because it's easy to find on a credit report when someone is not paying their debts. Housing needs to stop being taxed like a luxury yacht. The double land transfer tax, the obscene development charges in Toronto, they treat a basic human need like a sin tax on tobacco or alcohol. Both the municipal and provincial land transfer taxes need to be eliminated, and development charges need to be curtailed. To replace that revenue, the federal and provincial governments must move towards a construction infrastructure fund that pays for things like sewers and the transit required for new density, like had historically been done, rather than dumping those costs onto the buyers of new constructions. It's just not fair. The current requirement to pre-sell 70% of a building to secure private financing is a major obstacle blocking housing supply today. We need to shift toward government-backed construction financing like what is being done with the CHMC MLI Select program. By providing low-interest, direct-to-builder loans, similar to the model used during the post-war housing boom, we can maintain construction momentum even when the private investment market is cold. Furthermore, developers must shoulder more of the risk. If a project's business case does not support its fundamentals, it should not be built for speculation. This shift is essential to ensure that housing remains a basic need rather than a financial commodity. We can change the taxes and the floor plans, but if it still takes 7 to 10 years to get a development approved in Toronto, the supply cliff is inevitable. We are facing death by 1,000 permits, and it needs to change. We need automatic approval for density and fast-tracking project proposals. If a project meets a predefined set of livability and zoning standards, it should be as of right. We cannot afford to let local NIMBYism and municipal red tape hold the national economy hostage any longer. Now, we're currently standing at a crossroads. For years, Toronto's housing market has functioned on autopilot. It was fueled by low interest rates and a relentless influx of capital. But the autopilot is disengaged, and with new sales down 99% and the 70% pre-sale model effectively dead, the city is heading toward a multi-year supply vacuum that is going to start to be felt in 2028 and 2029. If we continue to treat housing as a luxury to be taxed rather than an infrastructure to be built, the consequences will be generational. The most dangerous trend of the last 10 years wasn't just high prices. It's the formalization of a two-tier society where home ownership is no longer a milestone of merit, but a byproduct of inheritance, with the market increasingly gated by the bank of mom and dad. We need better, more affordable options. So, those are my thoughts. What do you think needs to change? Let me know in the comments.